How to move from having a function that runs every time you click to having different shapes and the ability to toggle what happens when you click. So right now I have a very simple file. I just created, in my app, I created a drawing, and over in app.ts I import drawing, and then the drawing file imports the canvas and context from the canvas. And I created this very simple draw triangle function, which uses an x and a y value. Those are both numbers. Here, I'll go ahead and add my type hinting. And I've got a canvas event listener, which when I click, draws the triangle. What I want to do is make it so that it could draw a square too. And then I want to make a button that changes between the square and the triangle. So the first thing I'm going to do is realize that I'm going to have to create a variable to hold the drawing function. So I'll call my variable draw function to stand for the draw function, and I'll set that variable initially to draw triangle. And then here I'm going to call draw function. So right now, all I did was add an extra step. So currently, I've got a function called draw triangle. I define my variable draw function to be equal to draw triangle, and then I call the function draw function. So why is that special? Well, because now I could build more functions. I could build a draw square, let's say. And if I change this to point to draw square, now I'll be drawing the square instead. So that's pretty good. Very straightforward. The last thing I need to do is create a new function that will change between these in the button. So I'm going to use the setup that I had in controls. I'll copy from the template that make button code, which just puts buttons up on top of my app. Make button. And I'll go ahead and make a button called square. And I'll make a button called triangle. All right, now I got two buttons that show up. And then I'm going to add an event listener so that when we click on the square button, we're just going to say draw function equals draw square. And when we click on the triangle button, we're just going to say draw function equals draw triangle. So all these buttons do is change which shape we draw. Triangle and square. Pretty good. So that's very straightforward. The key concept I introduced is the variable. So variables can be used for any kind of value you want. And by creating this variable, I can then change between these. Let me show you one more variable. Let's say that I wanted to change whether these are filled or not. I can say let fill mode equals true, let's say. And then right now, each of my draw functions ends with a CTX stroke. So I'm going to make a new function called finish drawing, and it's just going to check the variable. It's going to say if fill mode CTX fill, else CTX stroke. And then everywhere where I called stroke, I'll just replace it with finish drawing. All right, So now, if fill mode is true, we're going to fill. And if I went and changed fill mode to false, it would be false. So then the last step is to add another button for filling. So I go ahead and say let fill button equal make button fill. Fill button add event listener click function fill mode equals, and I'm going to just make this toggle, so I'm going to use the exclamation point, which means not. So this is a weird little line of code. Just zoom in to explain this. Fill mode equals not fill mode, and what that says is make fill mode true if it's false and false if it's true. So it'll turn it on and off. Each time I click it, it changes. Very nice. Okay, we're pretty good. There's a few little niceties I could add. Among them, for example, the fill mode here, I could add a little if statement, and I could say, hey, if fill mode is true, fill button inner text equals fill, else fill button inner text equals outline. And now it will change to outline. I could get fancier and change the style too. Background color equals style. So now I'm just changing the background color when it's on or off. Try that out. Fill, outline. Fill, outline. Very nice. That's kind of elegant. Doing the same with the square and triangle would be possible. That's a little bit more complicated because I'd have to change the color on all the other ones. But it's doable. Probably the nicest way to do that would be to go ahead and, well, I'll just do it by hand for now since we're just beginning. There's fancier ways to do this, but I can say here, square button style, you know, red, cool. And then I would do the opposite. If you have a lot of tools, you probably don't want to do code like this. You'll notice this code is getting repetitive already. So there are some techniques to make this a little more elegant, but we're going to just start with the simple. So now I can go ahead and put an outline so you can see which one is selected. And you can see when we're in fill mode or when we're in outline mode. All right. I think that's a relatively complete demonstration of the idea of using a variable. Here I've got a true and a false variable. I've got a square variable. I guess the last variable you might add would be like a numeric variable. I could set a size, let's say. And then I could use the size variable in all of my drawing functions. Oops. All right, and for that, to just use buttons, I'd have to make buttons that, again, set the size. You could also create an input. I'll do a separate video on how to use inputs with values, but this is pretty good. All right, all set.